Hi, my name is Marshall, and this is Waveform. I think every sound designer has a certain category of sounds that they love the most or enjoy recording more than anything else, like gunshots, ambience, dialogue, Foley, etc. Today, I'm excited to say that we'll be recording sounds from my favorite category, chanting crowds of 1,000 or more people in close proximity at sporting events.
All right, the breaking news.
If you look at New York, it was doing this.
The statewide stay-at-home order.
The number of cases stays high.
Anderson, this is inexcusable.
My favorite category, horror games that you play alone in your room.
We're hiding, Daddy.
In general, let's admit, most people don't think about sound design that much when they're playing a game.
You know what we don't need? We don't need the sound engineer to come up and give a speech. That's what we
Yes.
I need to know about how your grandma taught you to mix on the treble.
Oh my God, yes.
Watch my mic get turned off right now.
But if there's one genre that gets people a bit more excited about sound than the others, it's horror. I think sound effects are even more important than visuals in the horror genre for creating atmosphere and, of course, delivering scares. Change the sound design of a scary moment in a game and you can remove the effect completely. But why is horror the special genre? Why does sound have so much more impact when we feel vulnerable? Have you ever been driving back from a scary movie or finished playing a horror game in your room and felt so on edge that you could hear the rustle of your own clothes or maybe even your own heartbeat? When your adrenaline's pumping, small noises you otherwise might not even register become startlingly loud. That feeling of intense focus, I think, is why horror relies so much on sound to choreograph how the player's feeling. In the moments when the player's senses are heightened, it presents an opportunity for us as sound designers to create something even more meaningful and intense than we could normally. The ceiling for our emotional influence on the player is much higher in a creepy walk down a dimly lit hallway than during a simple NPC interaction or running from objective to objective, for example. But so what? Even if we have all that opportunity, what are we supposed to do with it? In this episode, I want to discuss 3 things that you can do. We've talked a lot in previous episodes about how to create a sense of immersion with audio, and there's no question that one of the best ways to do that is with reverb. Take a look at this hallway, for example. Let's say the players just started the game, the house is massive, it's a stormy night outside, and we want to give a sense of being lost or small in comparison to the house. We could do that by adding large convolution reverb like this. But what if the situation was different? Maybe this walking section happens right after the player's first big encounter with the monster, and we want them to feel like the creature could be right around any corner. Maybe instead of something big, we could pull back on the size of the reverb and turn up the sounds of clothing and footsteps to bring the focus to within a 3-foot radius of the player. In the first version, the focus was more on the room and it felt lonely and hopeless, and in this version it feels more cramped and tense. Sometimes it's not about how to make the sounds feel right in the scene, it's more about figuring out what right is. All the creative choices you can make just in the ambience of a room subconsciously suggest things to the player, and give them a set of expectations and rules that the soundscape will follow for the rest of the game. Things aren't so black and white though. If every room had the same reverb settings, you'd be left with a very boring and flat sounding environment. In horror, the way sound reflects off of the walls has to change as the player moves throughout the world, much the same way lighting, music, and gameplay do to fit the story. Take a listen to this clip again. This time I'm going to modulate between our 2 reverb profiles that we made. As always, if you guys would like to see a full 30-minute long lesson video on how I made these designs in detail, feel free to join the Patreon. Link is in the description. Maybe even more important than setting rules and expectations with your sound design is breaking those rules later. Let's say that we decided to use our close, dry reverb technique in the first 3 scares of a horror game we're working on. Slowly, as the player gets close to the corner, the atmosphere subtly shifts and makes them focus more closely, then we reveal something scary or unexpected. This is all well and good, but if we continue to use this formula, we're going to lose the most important part of the scare, which is the unexpectedness. Now every time the player rounds a corner and hears their Foley become more close and dry, they're bracing themselves for another scare like the one they just experienced. This is where defying the player's expectation becomes powerful. Because we've set up that expectation, we can now use it to lure the player into a false sense of control or understanding of the threats around them. Next time the player rounds the corner, we do the same audio trick. Reverb shifts, atmosphere tightens up, the player's ready for a scare, but this time nothing. It's just a normal hallway. This is what I mean by defying expectations. Doing this will bring up questions in the player's mind. Did I miss something? What's about to happen? When we've successfully landed this punch on the player, we can even take it the extra mile and pull out even more reverb so all they hear is a soft room tone and their movement sounds. Sometimes just the expectation of being scared is even worse than the real thing. Think about it this way. Imagine you're going to a haunted house with your friends. You find on the website that it says 100 staff members working hard to scare you. When you get in, they make you sign waivers about not injuring the staff. They inform you multiple times that you can't touch any of the performers, etc. Then you get into the corn maze and there's nobody. For the first 30 minutes, you never see a person. Around every corner, you'd feel more and more anticipation and fear. The scare started before you even got in the car. As sound designers, this is what we should be trying to emulate with our implementation. If you can't defy expectations and build tension effectively, then you're leaving a lot on the table. This third category is probably the thing most associated with the horror genre, and that's vocalizations and motifs. This category is where iconic sounds like the Predator mouth clicks and Freddy Krueger's glove live. Once you've done all you can to add tension and atmosphere in the scene, what's the payoff going to sound like? There are an infinite number of sounds that can work in these situations, and that's more where your emotional judgment as a sound designer comes in. What's so scary about this creature? Is it how mutated and unrecognizable it is, or maybe it's how unpredictable its movements are? These are the types of things that you should allow your source material to be derived from. If I'm designing for my sample library, one of my favorite ways of approaching a design like this is to start with pen and paper. Instead of just opening my DAW and searching monster or creature, I try to come up with a written list of elements that I specifically want in my design. Avoiding the computer screen is super important at this stage because it's too easy to get sucked into the technical parts of the design too quickly, which is exactly the opposite of how you want to be thinking when you're trying to be creative and come up with a unique sound. Here's an example. What if our player had to sneak past a creature feasting on something? We could make that creature sound like a giant bear with huge claws. Or maybe like a mutant with insect-like mandibles on its jaw. Maybe the creature is a cosmic alien that doesn't even live in our dimension and eats light. Ultimately, these creative choices are exactly that, creative choices. Gather source material that makes you feel like you want the scene to feel, and fits specifically to the character you're designing for. Before we end this episode, I have an audio challenge for you guys because I know you're all sitting in your houses quarantined just like me, and I think it could be fun for everyone to flex those sound designer muscles and keep your skills honed and sharp while we all ride out COVID-19 together. Naturally, the challenge is entirely in the box using your own personal sample library and requires no leaving the house at all. Here's the challenge. Find some concept art of a horror environment that you think looks scary, indoor, outdoor, anything goes. It can even be a screenshot from your favorite horror game. Then make a looping atmospheric design for that environment. Get creative and try to make the image come to life with sound design. Tweet me your designs when you finish. You guys know the drill. Waveform t-shirts in the description, tiramisu sampler and waveform sample library on the Patreon. A special thanks to all the new patrons last month. So glad you guys are all part of the Waveform family now. Looking forward to chatting with you guys on the Patreon. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.